what we're really focusing on is building a good vendor risk management program. But we also have existing vendors, right? This is an ongoing, an ongoing challenge. And so one of the questions I get a lot is kind of what do we do with our existing vendors? And this comes to me a lot in the form of there are new privacy law requirements. We need to update our contracts. We have 500 vendors. Do we need to update all of them before this new law comes into effect? How can we manage that risk? And so a key underlying piece is, of course, understanding who your vendor engagements are. Literally, what is your list of vendors? What services do they provide? What kind of information are they processing? And how are they getting that information? Do you send an email once a month with some information in it? Or do they have an API that's pushing information to them every day? And so using that, you can understand what the different risks are for different types of vendors. This can also go into ongoing assessment, right? You have your higher risk vendors who should be assessed on a more regular basis than your lower risk vendors. And so you want to, when you're creating a program, not only do this, get your controls in place when you bring in new vendors, but you also want to figure out you also want to incorporate your existing vendors. And so by doing that, it's helpful to look at the different engagements and also see if you're using everything. I have a lot of clients who have websites, and on those websites, they use vendors that provide cookies on the websites. And sometimes those are really outdated. They're not using them anymore. They're not looking at the data. It was put on for one campaign and pulled off. And there's just a cookie lingering on their website that hasn't been removed because the person who originally put it on has left and there's been, turnover. And so making sure that you're actually using all of your existing vendors. And if not, if there's anything you need to do in the termination process to make sure that they're not still collecting data from you. And then, of course, you want to review your contracts and update it as needed. A lot of times we have vendor engagements that are a decade old. And so what that might mean is that you've been amending the same agreement for a decade. What that might mean is that you have an agreement with an online provider and they've been updating their contracts with you, but you haven't been reviewing them, right? Someone on the IT team gets an annual notice that Salesforce has updated their agreement. I'm not picking on Salesforce. That's an old example from when I was in-house. I got that email. But it's not getting to the lawyers to actually review and make sure that there's not some new term that is important to negotiate. So and then of course, updating to comply with new laws, to comply with new considerations. We'll talk a little bit about kind of AI terms, and AI is the hot buzzword right now. AI has existed for years. We're using AI in a ton of our terms. The email suggestions on what to respond to have been around for years. It's being used in new and interesting ways. And so people are very interested in it now, and we're figuring out ways that we want to contract around it. And so making sure that, so when we are managing our existing vendors, it's definitely it's a fact-based process, like everything is. So you want to look at your higher risk vendors. You want to look at people who have financial information, employee information, benefits, other sensitive personal information, who have just large quantities of data, versus vendors that might have extremely limited information. They, offer a tool that 5 people use, and they have those people's work email, and that's really it. The tool doesn't actually process personal data. So, and then you want to make sure, you want to prioritize those higher risk vendors and look at what they're doing and use that information to figure out, do you need to update your existing contracts? Are there new things you care about? Because also, internally, you want to make sure that your vendor contracts, your audit processes, your processes are in place to keep an eye on your existing vendors as well, not just new ones. Because a lot of times these relationships, if they're going well, they last for a really long time. And we like that.